I want to introduce the concept of Plan B. In my classes, I teach Plan A, where you experience a problem and come up with a solution. We've covered that. But what about the common case wherein someone has a resource for some cool product overseas or just wants to import something off the shelf like Chinese knives? I call this Plan B, and in some ways Plan B is easier than Plan A. I enjoy cooking, and preparation is 90% of the job. Watching Chinese chefs cook, I've been intrigued by their knives and their techniques. I bought a Chinese knife and I loved it. Now I have about 25 of them. What I appreciated immediately was the fact that the knife was easy to sharpen, very fast, and to a much higher degree than a stainless steel knives. Any chef will tell you that a dull knife is far more dangerous than a sharp knife. A dull knife takes more force to work, leading to slipping and injury. A sharp knife does the job. Stainless steel is much harder metal, and when such metal knives lose their edge, it takes much more to sharpen again. Such knives are also lighter, meaning more force by the chef is necessary to use them to cut. The carbon steel knives are heavier, which makes them easier to use if you let the knife do the cutting instead of your own force. But most important, as a softer metal, honing the edge a razor sharp is easy and fast. Although you have to get used to letting the weight do the cutting, the sharpness makes for easy work and beautiful clean cuts. I can dice an onion cleaner and faster than with a Cuisinart, and since these knives are so cheap, maybe 1/5 the cost or more, buying a knife for each job is not a problem. There is a problem with carbon knives. I found that they rust after I clean them. Carbon steel knives rust like an iron skillet will rust if it is not seasoned. Now, an iron skillet is seasoned with heat and oil, and once seasoned it becomes a non-stick skillet. Non-stick surfaces are unhealthy if they're the plastic kind, and properly cared for iron skillets become non-stick. As to the staining on rusting on knives, the carbon knife aficionado Daphne Dulibre says, knives of carbon steel are reactive. Good carbon steel darkens in reaction to acids and oxidizers in food. Rust, of course, is an oxidation process too. But in the first case, you get FeO3, ferrous O3, a black rust, and in the second case you get ferrous O2, FeO2, a red rust. Black rust is stable and durable. Also, if oiled, using cooking oil or grease from the meats will do fine. Black oxide sets and stabilizes the surface of the steel, helping to prevent further rust. A fine carbon steel knife will and rightly should develop a fine blue, gray, black patina. You don't want to remove this surface. It's a desirable trait of a fine carbon steel knife. Now, and the Chinese knife vendors I met said simply, let the grease from the food protect the knife. So, simple way of putting that. Now, in Plan B, for working with knives, you formed a hypothesis. You say Chinese knives are wonderful, everybody will want to buy the knives. But you go and you find what you can about the knives. Now, presuming you saw people working with them overseas. Now, here in Saigon, you see the butcher cutting up pork and chicken and fish. Now, all the butchers not only use the fine carbon steel knives, which rust, they also use those wood rounds as cutting blocks, and that becomes part of the deal. If you're going to use these knives, using the wood round for as a chopping block is part of the deal, although of course we use the plastic ones in the United States. The thing that amazes me is how expertly she makes the cuts, calmly, casually. I would lose a finger. But she has all her fingers, and she knows what she's doing. This is an amazing thing to me. Everybody asks me in Saigon, have you ever been here before? To which I answer, I was invited a long time ago by my government to go to Vietnam. I declined. So this was my first trip to Saigon. So in Plan B, you formed a hypothesis such as Chinese knives are wonderful, everybody will want to buy them. So you also, and you may have seen these in Hong Kong, here are the rounds, and you may have taken the effort to track down the very best Chinese knife vendor in the world. And here's one on Shanghai Road, Cheeky Cutlery Company. So your first job is to test your hypothesis. You do this by naming the stores that will actually sell your knives, such as Seattle Knife Company or maybe the distributor Dick's Restaurant Supply or whatever. Now, you do not try to sell your products. You just test your hypothesis. If you have a sample, this is good, but it's not 100% necessary. Simply walk into the store or company you believe would that would be your customer and say, "I believe if I import these knives, you would buy them from me. Am I right?" Note, you're not trying to sell the knives. You're merely trying to test your hypothesis. Listen to the response from your potential customer. Usually the answer is no, and they tell you why. The why can be very important. It gives you what might work. Since you have been told no, aren't you glad that you do not already have a garage full of these knives? But getting back to the no, if you can overcome whatever objection the retailers have given you, whether it's packaging or instruction manual or whatever, then you perhaps can get a chance where you can sell these knives. In the case of these Chinese knives, at Dick's Restaurant Supply, one of the women just looked up as I was asking the question and said NSF. Now, having worked in food service before, I know what NSF means. It means National Sanitation Foundation. What it means is if the product used in the kitchen does not have the NSF seal, it either means points off for lack of sanitation, or the product is outright illegal to use in a kitchen, such as in New York City. Now, Chinese restaurants use them, but like they said in the movie, forget it, Jake, it's Chinatown. They have different rules down there, so this just would not sell to food service. So those markets are out for this particular product. So that leaves, though, of course, the much larger product of household. So the issue here is then for me to approach the retail stores and see if they're willing to sell the carbon steel knives and find out what the objections are and then overcome them. Now, although I like cooking and although I like carbon steel knives, I don't have a passion for these knives or for the product, so I would never pursue it. Yes, I like the knives. Yes, I knew the knives, but that's not my passion, so it's not my field. Better for somebody who has a passion for knives to pursue this business. Although I think Plan A is the ideal, and that's what I teach, Plan B is workable. You simply take samples out, find out what the retailers say about it, and act on the information you gain from taking those out into the market. That is workable and will probably lead to you developing your own designs.
Help me.